guess the first thing that I'd like to do is to utilize the already existing menu item and change the caption of that menu item. So let's call this generate QR code image. Everything else looks pretty good. We can jump directly to the on command method and remove the throw not implemented exception, so we don't need that anymore. And by looking at the rest of the code here, there isn't much to change. We're not going to be doing any assembly loading or logging. We're going to keep this pretty simple and generate the QR code from the affected file. Alright, I'd like to start things by creating an error list, and this error list can be a string builder. Now the awesome thing about string builders is that the string builder class does come with an append line method that allows us to append a line into the string builder. So allow us kind of like to write pretty much a paragraph. So let me do control dot here, and I'm missing a using statement for system.text. Just gonna press enter here, and that adds the using statement for system.text. Going back here, after creating my error list that we're going to use to append errors in case of an exception or something going wrong in our code, let's get the window handle. We're going to use this for checking files in and out. So the window handle always comes from the PO command or the command EDM command. So that would be PO command.mpl parent handle. So this is pretty much handle of the window where the add-in is executing. And almost all the time, this executing is going to be Windows Explorer. We are provided a list of affected files through the PPO data. I'm going to make use of a feature that exists within PDM framework through the add-in.base by typing in here base dot for each file. So for each file, we're going to have to reference the PPO data, and we're going to supply it with an action that takes in an IEDM file 5. We'll call this file, and this will be executed, or this action will execute for every file coming from the PPO data. So let me do control dot here, and let's see what's going now. It's not what Visual Studio is not liking. It's probably the miscapitalized F. So for each of these files, first thing that we want to do is to get the parent folder ID. So let me type in here var parent folder ID. We'll call this file dot get parent folder ID. This method obviously does not exist within PDM framework, or rather, sorry, within neither PDM framework nor the IEDM library of SOLIDWORKS PDM. So I'm going to make use of another NuGet package. If I go here, and I go to manage my NuGet package extensions, or NuGet package, sorry, packages. I'm going to try to go to nuget.org and type in here PDM Professional extensions. This is another NuGet package by Blue Systems that contains extension methods for PDM. So I'm going to click on install, and then I'm going to click on accept here. As you can see, it adds a new DLL. Going back to addin.cs here, I can press control dot and then apply the new using statement, which adds this namespace PDM Professional extensions. So this method in particular returns the parent folder ID of the IEDM file 5. Now that I have that, I can pretty much try to get the local path of the affected file. So let's call this local path equal .file get local path, and the local path requires the parent folder ID, which we already have. Great. And then let's just define the path of the QR code image. Let's call it a PNG path, and this will be equal to system.io .path.change extension. See, all we want here is to change the extension from the path, from the local path variable, to be PNG. This dot here is kind of optional. So, all right, now that we have that, let's wrap everything in a try-catch block to catch any exceptions that get thrown through the remainder of our program. And the first thing that I think we should do is to create a pair of strings and objects that would be that would make the variables names and their values. So let's call this pairs equal dictionary of strings and objects. And in here, I'm just going to add my variables and their values from the IEDM file. So in here, I'm missing a using statement. So that would be using system.collection.generics is where we find the dictionary class. And inside the dictionary class, we'll start, for example, by adding the description variable, and then the value of the description variable, we get that through using another extension method from PDM Professional extensions, and the method is called getVariableValue. Now it's going to take in the variable name, and I'll do the same thing here as well. Let's just use 3, I guess. Let's call this part numbers, and we'll call this author. Now you might get exceptions if you were to use these particular variables, because one, they may not be available in the data card of the file, and two, they might not actually have values. So just make sure that the variables that you're going to use do have value within the add configuration. So this would only work for I think part files, or SOLIDWORKS documents rather. Alright, so now that we have a pair or a dictionary of variables and their values, let's string them together and make an entire string that contains the file name, and then description, and then equal, and the value of description, part number, and then the value of the part number, and then author, and then the value of the author variable. So let's first of all get the variable names. So I'll do variables, or variable names equal to pairs.keys to string, and this will be an array of strings such as description, part number, and an author. And then I'll get the values, same thing, we'll do pairs.values, and then to array. So sorry about that. Do control dot here, system.link, and I've made the mistake here. We want an array, so we won't be using toString, but rather toArray in this case. So we'll have two arrays. The first one is variable names, and the second one is values. Now I could simply use the select method from system.link. So we'll call this string equal to variables or variable names. Select. We want to select everything, and in that selection we want to do we want to format the selected item to look like itself, which will be here x equal to values, and then the index at which the item is, which will match the index of its appropriate value in the values array. So that would be here array dot index off, and we'll do variable names, and then do x, and that should do it. Well, maybe you could probably append at the end here, or we can do that at the start, and x. Great. Now let's finally define the QR string. So we'll be QR str equal to, let's do maybe file name, or rather file dot name, and then dash, or we won't need the dash since we have the at here. Let's do str. Great. Now we have our method, or rather we have our QR code or QR string that we want to encode into a PNG. Let's start by making sure, first of all, that the QR code image exists in PDM. So let's try to do that. So I'll define a for the variable here. We'll call it parent folder. We'll need that. And then I'll define a variable here called PNG file. And then we'll use this .volt, or simply just volt, which is a property that returns the IEDM volt 5, and this property exists within the base class. And then we'll use another extension method that will return a file from a path. Now the awesome thing about this extension method is that if it doesn't find the file, it doesn't throw an exception, it will just return a null. So in our case, this will be PNG path, and the out would be the parent folder. Okay, now that we have our PNG file, now if the PNG file is not null, means that it exists, right? One of the first things that we want to do is check it out. So let me do var, let me get the check-in status of the file. We have another extension method for this that makes our life a whole lot easier. So we'll call this checkout action. Var checkout action equals to png file dot get required checkout action. This returns an enum that we could use in a switch statement. So switch checked out or checkout action. So we have three use cases. As the first case is do nothing, file is checked out by me. That's fantastic. So we don't have to do anything in that case. So I can just remove the break, or keep the break there rather. And then file checked in can be checked out. So this is where we check out the PNG file. And so let's go ahead and do that. So that would be PNG file dot log file is how we check out a file in PDM. The parent folder would be parent folder ID. And then the window handle would be window handle, and perhaps we could even use parent folder.id here. And then the log, we'll just use the simple log here. We don't have anything fancy, so IEDM lock flag, which is simple. And then add the break statement. If the file is checked out by somebody else, then there isn't much we can do. We can return, rather than return an error, we can append the error to the error list. So in here, I'll probably say the png file.name, say file is checked out by, and then we'll just put in here the name of the user that has the file checked out. So png file dot locked user.name, or locked by user.name. And that should be okay. So in that case, we can just ignore the remainder of our code and just return and jump to the next item. And by the next item, I mean the next item in the PPO data. Great. Now at this point, we assume that our file is actually checked out. We can go and sort of override that existing version and generate the QR code. So I'm going to create a method called here, generate QR code, and this method is going to take in the QR string, and then the next parameter will be the path, which will be the PNG path. All right, we'll generate this in here. Let's see, Visual Studio. That's exactly what we need. Perfect. And we'll come back to this later on. Alrighty. Now after our file gets generated, all we need to do is pretty much to check it back into the vault. So we do that with png file.log file, which the way that we check it in, the parent folder. So that would be parent folder i.id. And the parent window handle, that would be window handle. And finally, we don't have to do anything fancy to check it in, so we don't need any flags here. Perhaps, I think we might have missed the message, and that's because I've used the wrong method, which is unlock file rather is the one that allows us to check the file back into the vault. And the message here, we can say that checked in by, and we'll use the identity field from the add-in base that allows us to get the add-in name and also the add-in version. So that would be identity.version. Great. We have checked our file in. Now the other use case is if the file does not exist, and in that way we could generate it and then add it to the vault and then check it in. So we'll call the same function here. So generate QRCode, and this will generate a file, and then we'll have to get the folder path, which I think we already have here. So we have the file parent ID, and no, we don't. We have the local path of the file, but we don't have the folder itself. So we'll do that. That shouldn't be too hard to do. So first of all, we'll just get the folder path. We'll do a folder path. We can do that through the local, through the local file. So let's do folder path equal, and there's always a million ways to accomplish this. This might not be the most efficient way, so I'll use the new file info with local path to get the file information or the system file information about the affected file, and from it I'll just get the directory, and from the directory obviously I can get the full path name. And then we'll just define folder here, that will be vault, and we can do try get file folder from path, and in here we'll just supply it with the folder path, and then we'll just say if folder is not null. And if the folder is not null, what we want to do is simply add the generated QR code or the PNG path to our vault. So we'll do that with folder.addFile, and the addFile method wants the window handle, and then the string, which would be the source. In our case, that would be PNG path. We don't want to change the name, and we don't want to change, and then the PNG path, which is the source. We don't want to change the name or add anything specific in terms of adding the file to the vault. So this should be enough to add the file into the vault. And by default, this method would return, or rather it returns the ID of the added file. So we'll need this. And then we'll just do var PNG file equal to vault try or get object. And then the type will be file, and then the ID, we already have that. Perfect. And then we'll just have to cast this into an IEDM file 5. Perfect. I don't think I should call this a local variable because already you use it. And then once we have that, we can check if the PNG file exists or if it has been added successfully. If it exists, then it's not null, and then we can simply check it back in, or check it in for the first time. So I'll just copy paste this from above. Great. Else, right? We can simply say that something went wrong, or we couldn't add the file. So let's do error list, append line, and in here we'll just say since we failed to add the file, we can't use PNG file because that will be null. In this case, we'll just do system.io.path.get file name, and after we get the file name, we'll just get it from the PNG path. And then we can say here, could not add PNG to vault. Okay. And we can remove these curly braces because we don't need them really. Now that we have that, we can catch the remaining, or the exception, that any unhandled any exception that would occur through the try catch block, and we'll just append a line here. So append line, and then we could say, for example, we'll just use the same structure from the line above. Right, and we could say something like error message or e.message. All right, let's see what's wrong with this. With this string here, we're missing that $, and that should fix it. All right. Now, after our try catch block, what we could do is display the error to the user. So I could say var errors equals to errors list to string, and if errors, or if string is null or white space, which is the errors list. So basically we have been appending line by line these errors into the error list, and we're just converting them into one huge string that will display to the user. So we're just checking here if the string is not empty, right? So if this is not false, then we could do something like vault message to the user, and in here we'll just do main window handle, and the message could be, well, we can just put the errors directly in here. And for the buttons, we could use OK only. That should be fine. And then the caption, perhaps we could use the caption, the add-ins name and version. Perfect. Else, we'll do the same, except that we'll just display a success here. I mean, I'm not sure if this is useful. If you were to use this add-on on a daily basis, you probably don't want to see this every single time you create a PNG or a QR code. You only want to see the message box in case something went wrong. So, and at the bottom here, we can just ask PDM to refresh. So that will be ML refresh flag, and that would be in here EDM refresh flag. So this will refresh the Windows Explorer or the file list after the add-in executes. Awesome.